That is until the UPS strike of 1997. Now, I looked at actually over 500 news reports ranging from a whole span of media, everything from the business press to newspapers, national newspapers, radio, and so on. And I did an in-depth study of 3 national newspapers, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and USA Today, and 3 major television networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. Now, what I found was that during the first week of the strike, the coverage was typical. It was just anti-labor through and through. The strike was seen as a huge inconvenience. The workers were shown as, so irresponsible for having actually stopped the delivery of 80% of packages that are shipped by ground. And because no context was provided for why these workers went on strike, the whole thing was just presented as this big nuisance. Now, this could have actually, technically, could have continued for the entire duration of the strike. There's no reason why it should have changed. But something remarkable, I think, happened during the second week of the UPS strike. You actually, as Ron mentioned earlier, saw a shift in some news media outlets. You saw it in New York Times, you saw it in the Washington Post, and you saw it in ABC. And what you saw was there was much more sympathetic coverage of labor issues. They explained why the Teamsters had gone on strike, because it's only when you explain why people do things that you're able to empathize with them, right? So you actually got some background coverage. And what else? And I think the key thing that they did during this period is that they covered the message that the Teamsters were very well articulating about the strike. They covered it well, and the message was twofold. One, that the strike was about decent jobs for all Americans, and 2, it was about turning the tide against corporate greed. Because the previous year, UPS had made $1 billion in profits, and it came to the table with a 33-cent increase in hourly wages, which just shows you, the depth of the greed. And what I did is I counted the number of quotations in each of these sources. That is, who do they seek out as experts to cite in these various sources? First week, predictably, pro-business professors, corporate ideologues, and so on. Second week, it actually ties. You have a lot more pro-labor people, unionists, pro-labor academics, and so on, who are actually being allowed to talk about the strike. Right. Now, if some sections of the media had sympathetic coverage of labor issues during the second week of the strike, after the conclusion of the strike, this coverage actually became widespread. So everyone from the radio to general interest magazines, and even the business press, believe it or not, actually had an open and honest discussion about inequality in the United States. And I'll just quickly read you some examples. This is Business Week, not exactly known for its reputation for supporting workers. This is what they said after the strike, quote, "More important than the union victory is the way the Teamsters campaign captured what seems to be a new mood in America. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the public sided with the union, even though its walkout caused major inconveniences. Polls show the public supported the 185,000 striking workers by a 2-to-1 margin over management. The message? After a 6-year economic expansion that has created record corporate profits and vast wealth for investors, Americans are questioning why so many of their countrymen aren't getting a bigger piece of the pie." So here is Business Week acknowledging that, yes, we've been doing well, but you know what? That wealth is not trickling down, as Ronald Reagan promised it would. Here's Newsweek. Quote, "Union politics, the strike will affect millions of Americans, even those who have never shipped a package or joined a local, for it goes to the heart of large national questions. Will wages finally begin to go up as the Dow and productivity have risen?" And there's this chart which says, will you ever get a raise? And shows how for the vast majority of people, the income has either stayed flat or gone down. And so I thought this was a significant and huge moment in media history. Now the question, of course, is why did this happen? How did this happen? And can we do this again? And I'll speak very briefly about this. I spent, I think, about 50 pages in the book analyzing this, but I'll try to sum it up in 2 minutes in a nutshell. Essentially, if you look at the two sides that were involved in this battle for hearts and minds, on the one side you had the Teamsters, and they had the support of other unionists. Thankfully, the AFL-CIO came out and supported the Teamsters. They also had other people who were generally pro-labor. So that's one group. Think tanks, liberal and leftist think tanks, as well as labor academics who were associated with them. That's another group. And third, they had alternative media, small media that supported the Teamsters. Now, UPS had well-funded corporate think tanks, professors at well-funded universities, mainstream media, gigantic mainstream media, as well as politicians actually from both parties. Now, if you look at the balance of power, it's very unequal. But what happened during the course of the strike was a couple of things took place at the same time, pushing the balance of power into the Teamsters camp. And I'll quickly go over this. First, as I said earlier, the Teamsters crafted a message which actually resonated with the vast majority of people. Carey actually spoke brilliantly on TV about how this was a strike not just for the Teamsters, but for all Americans and so on. And the rank and file as well really articulated a similar message and talked about their own experiences. So this message was powerful. It really resonated with the public, so much so, as I said earlier, the public supported the Teamsters 2-1. Now, what that did, in addition to the fact that another poll found that 77% of Americans actually were paying either close or very close attention to the strike. By the way, this was the year that Clinton was involved in yet another sex scandal, but it really shows you why the Teamsters came out at the top of the list, as this is the story that people are paying the most attention to, more than sex scandals. And I think that really speaks to how if the media cover issues that are relevant to people, they will actually pay attention and have some stake in it. Anyway, so we have this poll, 2-1 support. We have 77% paying very close or close attention. And so some sections of the media felt a little pressure. We can't carry on with business as usual because people are actually scrutinizing what we're saying. And so the second week we saw a little bit of a shift. Then what happens is that politicians of various stripes also start to feel pressure. They wanted to get Bill Clinton to use the Taft-Hartley Act to actually end the strike. They couldn't, because again, vast majority of people, I think 78% said that Clinton shouldn't use the Taft-Hartley Act. Clinton doesn't use it. Then all of a sudden, the media have to do a double take. Okay, we're calling the strike a major inconvenience, but the president is not stopping the strike. So we better dump that way of framing the strike and actually look at issues. You start to see the corporate ideologues was the first week strike. This strike will do massive damage to the economy. We don't know why. UPS workers have gone on strike and so on. But the second week, they're singing a different tune as well. Because by this point, UPS's greed is out, in public knowledge and so on. So they have to do a double take, and they come up with this really interesting story, which they call UPS exceptionalism. And so what they argue is that, yes, UPS is a bad company, they are greedy, they don't treat their workers well, but we're really very good. So they started to abandon UPS, turn against UPS and so on. And so what you see is that as the strike progresses, one by one, all the typical allies that UPS could have relied on start to abandon them. And by the end of 2 weeks, they pretty much are, at a point where they have to go back and renegotiate their, what was it called, the last, best, and final contract? It wasn't. They had to go back and actually give the Teamsters, I think, the best contract that they have ever received in their history. So I'll come to a conclusion with this. I think the one point that I hope this book conveys is that there is a tendency among people to see the corporate media as being all-powerful, as being impervious to pressure from below. And I think what the Teamsters strike shows is that collective struggle, things like a national strike or even social movements, can in fact force the corporate media to deal with issues that affect ordinary people. And this, I hope, is a source of hope in a time that's so unjust and cruel and not good to the vast majority of us. I think we can make a difference and actually change that. Thank you.